Hello and welcome to yet another video. This one is brought to you by the lovely people at Snapcaster, the app for tracking and scanning your collection, as well as MTG Mintcard, one of the largest retailers of card games in Asia Pacific, as well as Ultimate Guard, your provider for sleeves, deck boxes, and playmats. They were so lovely to give me this this hoodie, and it's actually the first hoodie I've ever owned. And I absolutely love wearing these. I can just cuddle up in here. But enough about my my new clothing epiphany. What I'm here to do is to talk to you about modern. Normally my videos are arena on standard, but for this one, since right now my arena collection hasn't really been growing, as I haven't been playing it that much, I don't really have anything new to show you there. So instead, I'm gonna turn my attention to the deck that I played to 12-3 at GP Atlanta very recently, as it feels like that's a relevant point to bring up. I considered making an article, but I figured this would be another very good way of showcasing the deck, what it can do, and giving some strategic advice on how I proceed the deck. One thing though is that I already made this recording once, and it turns out that I had not plugged in my microphone properly, so that recording is completely useless. I played 2 matches, and what I'm gonna do is that for those 2 matches, I'm gonna do commentary on the replays of them, so that it won't be live commentary while I'm playing the match, but it will be kind of as an afterthought. The advantage here is that we get to skip all of my opponent's thinking time, and we just get to, just go right to, the hardcore discussions of my thought process and the considerations I went through as I played out the game. Alright, but let's get started on the deck tech. You can see deck list displayed on screen here and in my overlay as well. So Valakut is probably the modern deck I know the best out of the ones that are there. A lot of people call it red-green Scapeshift. I just really like to call it Valakut because, as you might end up seeing, is that I bought out Scapeshift very frequently. The problem with Scapeshift is that it just runs right into all the hate cards, like Blood Moon or Lena of Sanctity and such. Plus, against the aggressive decks that might stay above 18 life, it's against those aggressive decks that might stay above 18 life, it's kind of an 8 mana play when you're born into a lot of reactive cards. But let's actually start with just explaining what Valakut is, in case you're not keeping up with the modern metagame or you're new to it. This deck is built around this card Valakut. It's a ramp deck, red-green ramp deck, and Valakut is a card that says whenever a mountain enters the battlefield, if I have 5 other mountains, at least, it deals 3 damage to any target. So, you have Valakut in play, and you have 5 mountains. Then every card you play and every ramp spell, like every land and every ramp spell you play after that, will deal 3 damage, as long as, those are mountains. Note that it doesn't count only basic mountains. You also count stuff like Stomping Ground, Cinderglade, and even Sheltered Thicket. Which is very important that you get to have enough green sources, while also having most of your lands be actual mountains for the Valakut is very important. So what we aim to do is to activate this card as early as possible by ramping up our land count. We do this with Search for Tomorrow. You suspend this on turn 1, and then on turn 3, it's gonna go get you an untapped land, so you have 4 mana for turn 3, which is the exact same rate as if you play turn 2 Sakura Tri-Builder. You can sacrifice that, get a land, and then on turn 3 you'll have 4 mana. And Farseek is the same thing. It can't search for basic forest, but it can search for Stomping Ground and these types of cards, since they are mountains. So this card fits very perfectly into this deck. We also have Explore filling a very similar role. So I really like this mix of ramp spells. Also 1 Wood Elves that we can summon us pact for. Well, I'll probably get into that later. So we have this spread of ramp spells, and then we have our payoff. So the big payoff is this guy, Primeval Titan, the big daddy here, who whenever it comes into play, I can search for 2 lands. It doesn't have to be basic lands, it can be any lands. So usually what ends up happening is that you search up either a Valakut and a mountain to be able to just bolt some immediately for 3. And you'll also notice that I have mismatching Stomping Grounds. That's just how I roll. So when it comes into play, it gets to kill a creature immediately sometimes, or you can just get 2 Valakuts, and then even if your Primeval Titan is dealt with, well then every card you every Rem spell or every land you drop is gonna deal 6 damage to creatures or opponent or something. It's gonna be really trivial to end the game after that. So this card is the big one for the deck. And then we have Scapeshift, which is especially good in game 1, since this is kind of your combo kill, where what happens is that you ramp up to 7 lands and then you cast Scapeshift. And you get to sacrifice all your lands and search for, the same amount of lands. Which, I mean, doesn't really, impact your land count or anything. But what it does is that you can search out Valakut and 6 other mountains. Since they all come into play at the same time, Valakut will trigger 6 times for all 6 mountains, which is 18 damage. Which is often enough to kill the opponent in Modern because of the fetch shockland mana base or various other reasons. And if it isn't, well, you just have to wait until you get to 8 lands. And then you get 2 Valakuts and 6 mountains at 36 damage. You can also, with the aid of a lightning bolt, you can bring them to 17, and then you can do a 7-land kill with Scapeshift. But this is the reason why I don't like this card as much in the post-war games, where I'm very reactive, and I rarely cut all 4, but I frequently shave between 1 and 4 in these matchups, because yeah, well, I just don't want to. It's essentially going to be an 8-mana card, and I'm going to play out a little bit more like a control deck post-board, and I just don't want to draw multiple of these types of cards. Plus, if I draw multiples and they have a hate piece like Blood Moon or Leyline of Sanctity, which effectively shuts off my Valakut kill, then I again don't want to draw multiple Scapeshifts. Whereas you can just, play a 6/6 trample for 6 mana, essentially a Colossal Dreadmaw, and it's just really hard for some modern decks to beat. We round out the deck list with some interaction. The Lightning Bolt is just a classic. I think it's very important, and has been for a while in Modern because of stuff like Humans and Spirits. And because of the Rise of the Dredge, I'm playing main deck Relic and Anger of the Gods. Relic main is something that Valakut has been playing for a while, like on-off, and I think now is the time where you do play it main deck. It does fit the deck very well because you don't care about your own graveyard, and it does help a little bit with the consistency because you get to cycle it. As well as just random stuff that comes up like Tarmogoyf and Knight of the Reliquary. The fact that you can shrink their size comes up quite often, so you get to bolt them or just prevent yourself from getting killed that early. And there's actually a bunch of incidental stuff that it does in the format, where just having the advantage of having a relic I've found to be pretty good. Anger of the Gods, I usually play Sweltering Suns since you can cycle, but right now with the Rise of Dredge, I'd prefer to just have Anger of the Gods. Also quite good against the Hardened Scales deck, as you can sweep the board and then you don't get any Thopters from the Hangerback Walker. I'm also playing 1 Prismatic Omen. This card is something that's not in all the lists, but I think that playing exactly 1 is the sweet spot. So what it does is that it turns all your lands into mountains, which means that, or it turns all your lands into every basic land type, but mountain is the important one, which means that you can have which means that Valakut could start triggering from just having 6 lands in total rather than 7, because it counts itself as a mountain. It also means that when Valakut comes into play, it will trigger. So sometimes you have draws where you just draw 1 or 2 natural Valakuts and a Prismatic Omen, and you can just kind of take a control route where basically very quickly all your Ram spells turns into bolts. Your fetch lands are double bolts because they will both deal 3 damage when they come into play and when you fetch out a land. And they also mean that you can Scapeshift with 6 lands for the same reason, and you can just get 4 Valakuts and 2 other mountains and deal approximately 1 billion damage. And you can also Primeval Titan to get 2 Valakuts, which will both trigger immediately for like 12 damage already when you have the Prismatic Omen in play. So it does a lot of cool stuff, but it does nothing in multiples, and it's not super important to our game plan, so I think 1 is the exact right number. And I very rarely bought it out. Then you also have Summoner's Pact, which usually searches for Primeval Titan. It's kind of Titan number 5 to 6. You have no trouble playing for it once you have played your Primeval Titan. But it can also, in a pinch, get a Ram spell. That does come up sometimes. Or get a sideboarded creature. As for the sideboard, I think the most important thing is that we have all these green creatures, which allows us to switch our game plan a little bit, so to better combat hate. Like, if they focus on preventing the Valakut kill, well, I mean, you can just beat them down with Tireless Striker and Obstinate Baloth. Bailiff is a card that I really like. I just bring it in so many matchups. Like, it comes in against Jund and Burn, which are the obvious spots, but also against Control, Hollow One, and Dredge. I found it to be quite good. So I opted from 3 to 4. I used to play 2 Fractusk, 3 Bailout, and I'm not 100% sure that's the right split right now, but I think because of Dredge, and especially when Dredge has the creeping chills, which really demand you gain some life in order to stay in the game, I think 4 Bailout is a good number. And then you'll have a little bit more interaction, like some Relic and Damping Sphere for the combo decks, and you can destroy some artifacts. I think a Braid is pretty key in that you can board it in against humans, but it's still a hate card against Affinity, Hardened Scales and such. KCI. One thing to notice that I'm only playing 1 Damping Sphere. I see a lot of this playing a lot more, but my problem with the card is that against Storm and KCI, which are some of the matchups where it does work, they're usually ready for it anyway, like they'll have some sort of answer to it. So while it does give you some percentage points, I don't think it gives you as much. And also those matchups are quite bad to begin with, so I'm fine with just conceding those matchups and using my sideboard slots elsewhere. The one matchup where it does matter a lot is against Tron, where I do think Tron is like a slightly favored matchup already, but obviously, the having 3 Damping 3 in your sideboard will make it even more favorable. And that's a matchup where I feel like the percentages actually end up mattering. But for the most part, I think I'd rather spend my sideboard slots on, the cards I have here. So yeah, I went 12-3 at GP Atlanta with it, 24th, which was pretty sick. And I've only played this deck in 2 Grand Prix actually, because I always talk myself out of playing it for one reason or another. The only other Grand Prix I played it in was GP Birmingham in August 2017, where I also made top 8. So I've had pretty good results with this deck, and I absolutely love the simplicity of it. The fact that I can just focus on, the small decisions that may or may not matter, and just make sure that I play as well as I can, instead of having to play a complicated deck like Storm, where it's very hard to focus on the small things when I also have to just figure out how I actually end the game. So that's something I really enjoy about Valakut. But yeah, let's get into some games, and these might be either replays or live matches, depending on which video you're watching. But yep, see you around.